to whisper in your ear and tell you that I'm here and take you to the dance and maybe find romance. But you can't, so it's MOBTOWN life. I want to see the friends I miss, or give my mom a kiss, or get my hair cut right, or just sleep through the night. But you can't, so it's MOBTOWN life. MOBTOWN life, we'll drink with you forever. MOBTOWN life, in dark and stormy weather. MOBTOWN life, what else is there to do? Happy birthday, Mason and Janice. Then pandemic together. So grab your Wednesday best, at least the top, I guess. We'll take you to the moon. It's live to your bedroom. It's tonight, and it's MOBTOWN live.
All right, everybody, welcome to MOBTOWN Live. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are back again, welcome. For those of you who have never been here before, we are live from the MOBTOWN Ballroom, which is an arts venue in Baltimore City. My name is Sarah, and with me today is our brand new co-host, Hannah.
Hello.
This is Hannah Lane, everybody. Hannah, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Okay, I'll give that a try. I'm Hannah. Hello. This is my first time doing MOBTOWN Live with Sarah and Michael and everyone who is here, but there's not too many of us here because COVID-19. But I am from the Baltimore area. I have been swing dancing here since I was 17, 18-ish. And I guess I have a pretty lengthy relationship with these folks.
That is so wild.
Yeah?
I mean, like, because I started dancing when I was 15, so a lot of the people in the scene I've known for more than half my life, and like, it's weird to know you your entire adult life.
Yeah.
You know, and part of your child life.
Yeah. It's been a time. What else? I don't know who cares to know these things, but I went to Goucher College. I studied history and historic preservation and Africana studies. I guess I'm interested in learning about slavery in the mid-Atlantic of the United States, 19th century broadly. I like reading, I like dancing and roller skating. And yeah, I'm just kind of chilling.
Everyone. I'll stop putting you on the spot, but you're doing great. I'm making an aviation, Sarah style. Originally, when we started this live stream, we had a gag of making a cocktail every week and explaining it, and it was cool, and then it quickly devolved into me just dumping a bunch of things into a mixer. But you should look up an aviation, everyone. It is lemon juice, gin. Today, we're using Shot Tower gin from the Baltimore Spirit Company. Luxardo and creme de voilette. The proportions, Sarah style, are different than what they will be when you make them, so look it up. Today on the show, we have some really cool things happening. Chris from Shattered Spaces, this pretty awesome new theater production that is interactive and entirely online so that you can do it at home.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's stopping by later to tell us all about that. Our co-host Michael is going to be doing his segment called Sage and Sage, where he takes an audience question and calls on the greats from literature and philosophy and religion to give advice to you, especially during these shutdown times. And potentially most exciting, we are going to be visited by Aqeela Sherrills, who is a legendary activist and organizer who I initially heard about in college when I was studying peace studies and have been sort of following his work ever since. Hannah, do you like aviations?
All right, so like Sarah said, I have been hanging out here since I was a child. And only recently have I started enjoying alcoholic beverages here at the MOBTOWN Ballroom. But when I do, it's usually in aviation because I'm terrible at ordering myself drinks and know very little about alcohol. So this one's tasty.
And it's purple. Couple other quick notes. Today, when we have Aqeela on, just as usual, we will have the payment information up on the screen. Aqeela takes Cash App. If you don't have Cash App, then you can also send a payment to our Venmo, which is at MOBTOWN-Live. Just earmark it Aqeela so that we can be sure we don't miss it in all of our accounting. Besides that, we will also be taking audience questions. We have people behind the scenes who are going to be grabbing them in the chat throughout the show. We're on both YouTube and Facebook right now.
Wow.
Woohoo! So if you have any questions for Aqeela, please put them in the chat. We probably won't get to all of them, but we'll try to. All right, here you go. Yeah. You wanted a small one, sorry. There you go.
Thank you.
I did not super pay attention to that, so if you want some more creme de voilette or anything else.
It's not very purple.
Doesn't taste bad, though.
That tastes good. I like it.
Those are for you people backstage.
Thanks.
All right, so I think it's time to get this show on the road. Is that okay to do, Abby? Are we all set? No? Okay,
No,
great.
okay.
Oh, I got the text. Cool. A couple things. Those of you who filled out the census, thank you. Is it too late to continue filling out the census?
That pizza box we got today told us we could still fill out the
Good.
census.
So you should go fill out the census. This is something that we've been pumping since a couple months ago. You think the government's trying to track you. That's fair. I'm always afraid to write things on that too. The thing is that what this is used for is to divert funding and allocate various funds to people in different places. So if everyone in Baltimore City is too afraid to fill out the census, then we're not going to get enough money, and that shit lasts for 10 years.
A decade.
So fill it out. At the very least, be like, I'm a human who lives here. Yeah. And vote and all that. For those of you who didn't catch last week and also haven't looked at the news at all, Bill Henry won, and he's our new comptroller.
That's pretty great.
It is pretty great. And what else happened?
What else happened?
Brandon Scott won for mayor. Yeah. And yeah. Do we have any audience questions already while we're waiting for Aqeela?
Does anybody want to ask a question?
Something that I have been thinking a lot about is how the conversations on police reform and police abolition have been going, I guess primarily on Facebook. I don't know why I engage with that track.
Yeah. Huh?
But Hannah, is that, so it's weird because I studied like literally that in college.
Yeah.
Is it new to you, or is that like as someone who's a little younger than me, or is it something you've heard of before? Like how much
people talking about police reform and all that?
Yeah, like how much was it in your consciousness before the most recent uprisings?
I mean, probably since I was like, at least, and probably before in high school.
Yeah.
But I was like, Jesus, what was I, like 14 or 15 when young Trayvon Martin was murdered. So, I mean, yeah, it's been like pushing a decade that I've been observing folks chat about this and also discussing these things myself with my family and friends. But it's, I guess while these conversations are more visible to some, I am familiar with them for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
But that's just me. And then there are folks older than me who have, been alive a lot longer and
Right.
continue to witness these things since 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 40s, 50s. Look, it's been a long time.
I imagine that where you're placed in society also has I grew up in rural Massachusetts. I knew all the police officers in my town.
I cannot imagine that.
I mean, I'm not saying I liked them, but
Yeah, of course.
there were only 3, so and we called him Short Pants, and I can't remember, his pants were too short. Excuse me one second, everybody. Abby, do you want Aqeela's cell phone number? Yeah. All right.
But we're still running early, so.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh, are we?
Oh, yeah, we are still running early.
Someone would like to know why the two of you end up so well-adjusted despite attending Goucher. Brandy Fairwood.
Brandy?
Oh, my God.
Hey, Brandy, what's up?
Hi, Brandy. She didn't really ask that, did she? Oh,
Wow, so I will say it's been about 2 years since I graduated, so I've been doing a lot of personal healing
from Goucher or?
from Goucher. I think that's a big part of my answer. Time.
I'm not well adjusted, I think. But that's not Goucher's fault. That's just me.
That school is something.
I think it was also something really different for me and something really different for you. And we
Yeah.
went 8 years apart or something.
Yeah, and things change so quickly, and I'm no longer a student there, but speaking of people talking about police reform and policing, I know that students at Goucher have been talking a lot about that. The policing situation on that campus has changed a lot, moving from the Office of Public Safety, which is no longer a thing, I think.
They abolished their police.
Well,
Sorry.
well, it's not. Well, now they have a
brought in
contract
private
with
police force.
a private police force. I don't know. Can we say names of police forces on here? I'm not, but it's a lot. Good luck, Goucher.
Yeah. All right. What I am wondering is, we're running a little bit early, but
I have a question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Abby said she had some really good coffee today.
Yeah, true. Although when your friend makes you coffee, it's kind of just makes it taste better, All right. I think we're good to go.
All right, great. So, as we said before, today we're incredibly lucky to have legendary activist and organizer Aqeela Sherrills on the live stream. His bio is too long to give the whole thing of, so we're just going to toss out highlights. The sort of original claim to fame, at least what the internet says, is that he was one of the main people who brokered the Watts Truce, which is a peace treaty between the Bloods and the Crips in Watts, California in 1992, and it dramatically dropped the murder rate in LA, which is pretty amazing. Started out the gate in his early 20s with that, so, I feel good about myself.
Let's see. In recent years, Aqeela has partnered with the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, to put the public back in public safety. He co-founded something really interesting called the Newark Community Street Team, which in the past week pushed through a monumental legislative budget change which diverted $15 million of the Newark police budget into community-based anti-violence programs.
On top of that, he's the founder of the Community Self-Determination Institute, AmeriCAN, the Reverence Movement, and he's also worked with California crime victims for alternatives to the death penalty. So all in all, he's a super accomplished badass who's been doing the work that we're all talking about right now for decades before any of us were talking about it. Aqeela, are you there?
Oh, hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
See you really well.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, it's good to see you. This is Hannah. You met me during sound check, but this is Hannah.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I'm well. I like your hat.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so You've been working in the community since a young age, and you've done all sorts of stuff. Could you give us your sort of version of how you got started and the highlights and what's important to you?
Sure. I grew up in the Jordandown housing projects in Watts. I was instrumental in organizing the peace treaty between the Crips and Bloods in 1992 with my brother and a group of friends from the neighborhood. And, you know, growing up in the neighborhood, I mean, you witness things that no child should ever be subject to, right? I was, you know, fortunate to survive the 1980s crack cocaine war that literally, you know, I mean, took our neighborhood like Hurricane Katrina. I mean, it destroyed families and many individuals lost their lives as a part of the drug war in the community. So, you know, yeah, the work, you know, was monumental in terms of being able to shift the quality of life in the neighborhood. As I heard you say, Sarah, that in the first 2 years of the peace treaty between 1992 and 1994, gang homicides dropped 44% in Watts.
That's incredible. That's almost half.
Yes, I mean, and the legacy of the work in LA is that, you know, you know, first let me just say that it was a literal war between 1983 and 2003 in LA County. There were over 30,000 gang-related deaths, and it didn't include those who were permanently maimed or incarcerated for their life behind their participation. And even though, you know, this was a public health epidemic, it was a mental health epidemic, because there was a cry out for help. But because we live in a system that's built on systemic racism and implicit bias, the cries of these young Black and brown youth and young adults fell on deaf ears. And the trauma, the traumatic stress, the hypervigilance, the vicarious trauma was allowed to fester and to ripple in our neighborhoods. And we saw the impact of it, you know, in the 90s with the Patriot Act, and then, you know, the whole mass incarceration, you know, business that took place. But, you know, throughout it all, you know, many of us who were a part of the movement, we call it the longest running war in the history of this country. We were able to develop, you know, alternative strategies and solutions to the problem, and to export that to multiple cities across the country. You know, first through American with Hall of Fame football great Jim Brown. So before the advent of social media, we were in 15 cities across the country. Wow. And we're responsible for a deep decline in juvenile violence nationally. However, you rarely see that in media and in news articles, because we didn't have infrastructure and systems, you know, like law enforcement to be able to claim credit for our respective work. So, you know, in LA, places like LAPD, you know, budgets doubled and tripled in size. However, there was, the city did adopt our strategy and create Bridges 1 and 2 that became GRID, the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program, which is one of the most successful community-based intervention programs in the country. 10 consecutive years of data of showing that that community, you know, hiring credible messengers has the capacity to reduce violence and crime in neighborhoods without police, but also as a complementary strategy to policing.
Wow. So did you take that sort of model that you all developed in Watts and in LA and then move it out around the country?
Yes. So initially with American, I lived on the road for 4 years. First in Las Vegas, and this was in the early 90s, actually 89, 90. I mean, we organized a peace treaty between the Crips and Bloods in Vegas. 250 Crips and Bloods after, like, you know, 3 months of work. And Jan Liberty Jones was the first mayor, a woman mayor of Vegas. And, you know, folks were just shocked that we could do it. And then we went to Cleveland, Ohio, where I lived, you know, for a little under a year and a half. And we organized a peace treaty between, you know, the GDs, the gangster disciples and vice lords and the gangs in that particular city. And then had an impact on Chicago as well, working with the MCs and, you know, I mean, it dominoed to multiple cities across the country. And so I was, blessed and fortunate to ride that wave and be a part of those changes.
Had you envisioned that for your work?
Um, you know, I, I always thought that as a kid growing up in the projects, I'm the youngest of 10 kids in my family, um, had, a traumatic childhood. I was fortunate enough, inspired by one of my older sisters, who was the first in our family to go to a four-year university and graduate. Um, when I went to college, I had a transformative experience. I shared with a woman there that I was crazy about, that I was sexually abused as a kid, and realized that a lot of the trauma and violence that I participated in and perpetrated, was a result of that experience. And I didn't have language to to confront the perpetrator or to even question why this was allowed to happen, and nobody protected me in a sense, right? And so a part of me was like, my destiny was probably to end up dead or in prison. But I guess that spirit had a different design and plan for me. And so upon becoming awake, I tapped into my intuition and allowed it to guide me in the way in which it did. So I feel really fortunate and blessed to have had the opportunity to serve in the way in which I've been able to.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and what a time for it must be for you right now. I'm sure that you've had a lot of those times, but yeah, you wanna.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question, Mr. Sherrillss. So police reform, defunding the police, abolition, and all that are being talked about in mainstream media to an extent that a lot of people haven't seen before. So for those who are new to these ideas, could you tell us what a few of the schools of thought are? And where do you see your work on this spectrum of either like reforming the police or defunding the police or abolishing everything? So where do you see your work on that spectrum and in the history of debate and activism around policing?
Yes, I think that just a couple of schools of thought in terms of the whole defund the police campaign,
Yeah.
right? Um, you know, some people are abolitionists and feel like we need to just get rid of the cops, altogether, and get rid of policing altogether. Then there's folks who feel like we need to reform law enforcement and provide them with more procedural justice training and trauma training and different things like that. Then you have folks who just believe that we need to teach black boys and brown boys and girls to be more respectful of law enforcement, and those type of things wouldn't happen. So those are kind of like, I would say, some of the extremes, right?
Right.
And so just in terms of the abolition of police, I think that I don't think that anybody is saying that we should abolish police like 100%, right? Because police are essentially a component of the public safety strategy in any particular city. And I don't think that one size fits all. I think that every community is different and should look at policing, from their respective view, right? And so you have places like Camden, New Jersey, that had a really brutal police department and police force, and they were disbanded, and they contracted with the county, and just created more space for the chief to be able to hire, different officers.
I see what you mean.
Similarly, in Compton, California, in 2000, I'm much more familiar with Compton's process because I was there to witness it. In 2000, the city of Compton actually disbanded its police department because of corruption, because of excessive force issues, and police-involved shooting, and they end up contracting with the sheriff's department in LA County, right? So it's not a foregone conclusion, that in some cases, police departments can be disbanded, and cities can still be safe, right? I would say that I kind of fall in the middle of this whole thing in terms of reform. I believe that I don't think that we should be investing hundreds of millions of dollars into reforming the culture of police departments because, it's almost impossible to change a culture. Now, you can change demographics, but to changing a culture of a department that's rooted in white supremacy, right? And I want to just be frank, with the audience that
Tell 'em.
The history of the police department was rooted in officers being deployed to return enslaved people to bondage. That's the history of the police department, right? And so there's a real deep history of white supremacy and racism that's actually rooted in that overall structure. And it's a cellular memory in many black folks in this country because safety is not the same thing to people in white communities that it is in black communities in terms of policing, right? I know that in this country, we have a belief that public safety is a domain of law enforcement. You say public safety and people say police. But the reality is that the police are only one aspect of the public safety process, right? You can't have public safety without the public, right? And so, my belief is that you have to have an engaged citizenry, who is a part of the public safety process, right? And so I would say that public safety is not just the absence of violence and crime in a neighborhood. And I don't believe that public safety, that you can measure public safety with crime stats. It's a very inadequate way of measuring safety, like utilizing crime stats.
Yeah.
Because public safety is essentially the presence of well-being and the infrastructure to support people in their respective healing journey. In order for someone to feel safe, there has to be a system of services and support that meets people's collective need in a particular community. Now, the far extreme that I talked about in terms of people who just believe that that the police are fabulous and great, I would say you look at the consent decree in a place in a city like Newark, where I've been working for the past 6 years,
Or Baltimore.
there is documented civil rights violations. Cops have murdered people. They have planted drugs on people. They have sold drugs. They have harmed folks in the most, heinous ways. What do you say about that, right? What do you say about it? You can't just sweep it under the rug and say, hey, just follow, the law. When these folks are pulling people over and robbing them, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Right, yeah.
It's been really traumatic in some communities in this country in terms of law enforcement and police, right? And so again, I fall about in the center. I believe that we can develop complementary strategies to policing that involves hiring and training credible messengers, community residents as public safety professionals who understand standard operating procedures and protocol, and you deploy them in community to respond to high-risk situations as well as loitering issues and domestic issues. And you utilize a relationship-based approach, and you can actually reduce violence and crime as a key partner with law enforcement in cities.
Yeah, all of that is so much of what you just said is really interesting. I think the point that it is bizarre to me that we have one blanket thing for all these different communities, and then that we're judging that thing from different vantage points. I grew up in a place where there were 3 police officers. We didn't necessarily like them, but we knew them. They knew us. Our parents trusted them because they didn't send us to jail when they pulled us over. They took the marijuana, called our parents, and sent us home. And then it was dealt with at home, which is a completely different situation than, say, here in Baltimore. And so, of course, our conceptions of safety are really different.
Based policing. I'm sure that those officers lived in that neighborhood.
Exactly.
And 80% of the cops in the city of Newark don't live there. And in most big cities, 80% of the officers don't live in the city limits.
Right.
Yeah.
And
in which they're policing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that when someone from a suburban New England town hears abolish the police, they might hear abolish those 3 dudes who live in my neighborhood who are helping my kid not get arrested, not get in a car accident, when what we mean is abolish the dude hanging out at a car screaming at a teenager while a helicopter flies over them.
Right.
Yeah, so anyway, the point of that, sorry, classic me getting excited. You were leading into your idea of what you think community-based policing looks like. Could you tell us about the Newark Community Street Team, what it is and how it works?
So the Newark Community Street Team is the City of Newark's community-based public safety initiative. So in light of, the long history of civil rights violations by law enforcement in this city, the mayor, when he was elected in 2014, invited me to the city to build out the city's community-based public safety initiative, right? So we understand that violence is a public health issue, and we work through that frame. We targeted our work in the South and the West Ward in the city of Newark. And, these neighborhoods have been traditionally have very high, homicide rates and crime rates. And the reason is because there's been literally a lack of investment in people and in infrastructure in these neighborhoods for the past 50 years, right? And so NCST has a three-pronged approach. We have a high-risk intervention team, that intervenes in individuals and group conflicts, both present and historical ones, and utilize a relationship-based approach in order to resolve these conflicts. So we hire and train ex-gang members, ex-convicts, ex-drug dealers, people who are credible messengers in this work, who lived in this neighborhood, who've had the experience, of victimization and perpetration, but changed their lives for the positive, and now want to give back to something that they've actually taken away from, right? Our second prong is our Safe Passage program. We did a study with the health department and determined that most of the violence that's happening in the community was happening in and around schools. Things happen on campus on Monday morning that spills into the community,
Right.
and then on the weekend, things happen in the neighborhood on the weekend that spills into the campus. So our our Safe Passage team, which are also a group of these credible messengers, basically make sure our kids go to school safely and they come home safely. So every morning between 7:30 and 9, and then 2:30 and 4 in the afternoon, you will see our outreach workers out there in their black and gray vests, engaging the kids. We provide, a whole set of services. We do mentoring through a case management model. So 8 of our outreach workers are case managers, and they mentor through a case management model. So we help them, get haircuts. We help them get uniforms, a belt, an umbrella, a jacket in the wintertime. We provide all of those types of resources. If the family is struggling, we help them, with temporary food. We have a $200 hardship fund for every client that we serve, right? We provide pro bono legal services. Say that, you're a young man who's providing for your child and you have child support issues, Through our partnership with Rutgers Law School, we provide pro bono legal services to help folks to mediate their conflicts between, their intimate partner, so that they can have more resources and time for the kids.
That's really cool.
Right. So our third prong, and I would say is at the center of our theory of change, is our victim services. Right. Traditionally, people in Black folks aren't seen as victims in the neighborhood, and also, the term victim has a negative connotation in the community. Nobody wants to be a victim. So we, through my work in California with the Alliance for Safety and Justice, we launched a whole initiative that's now in 27 cities across the country called Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. We identify ourselves as survivors as opposed to victims. So we had to turn this thing on its head and shift the narrative, because when you say victim, people think of upper middle class women in suburbia, who are survivors of DV and sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And primarily our folks in our neighborhood are community violence, state violence, assaults, DV, all of these things across the board. However, there's a law in the state in terms of victims' comp, right? There's victims compensation and victim services. These are two major funds in the state that provide investment in resources for people who are victimized by crime that Black folks and brown folks are rarely ever able to access. In a city like Newark, 90% of people were denied victims' comp because of this thing called contributing behavior. So if Raheem is saying, if says he's selling drugs, right, mm-hmm. and he gets shot and killed, the state would basically say that, oh, he contributed to his own murder because he was selling drugs. And they will deny the family compensation to even bury their loved one.
Wow.
victim
so
blaming
this
like
creates
built in
all-
legally.
Yeah, it creates all types of stress and pressure and anger against the institution, also against law enforcement, because guess what? Law enforcement is where you have to go and get the police report and take it to the prosecutor's office in order to get it through. And so when you go to the police department, they're like, hey, who shot your son? And then if you don't know, they say, oh, you're not cooperating. Or if you're in the hospital, they'll put victim suspect on your application, which automatically disqualifies you from victim services. And then on top of all of that, less than 20%, we did a national study, less than 20% of folks even know that victim compensation even exists, right? And so in our communities. So the fourth piece that kind of like holds all of these things together is our advocacy work and our policy work. So we host a public safety policy forum twice a month called the Public Safety Roundtable. And these are residents from the neighborhood who've organized this to hold law enforcement, elected officials, community-based organizations who get resources to do work in our neighborhood accountable. Because sometimes these folks get big grants and they don't provide no services in the neighborhood. You call them, there's nobody there. It's been horrific, to say the least, right?
Wow.
And so just some of the accomplishments that we've had with our public safety roundtable that happens twice a month is that we went to our public safety director and said that, hey, your detectives are putting suspect victim on the application of these people who are harmed, good, bad, or indifferent. Raheem got shot, he survived, and they put suspect victim on the application, so he gets denied victim's comp. So now he can't get any counseling or therapeutic services. His mother, who was distraught, had to miss work for 2 weeks to take care of him, can't get wage replacement. His brothers and sisters who are all traumatized as a result of him being shot, can't get counseling and therapeutic services. And so we went to him and said, hey, we need, and it was an administrative change. So the community advocated, and we got our public safety director to send out a letter to all of the detectives in the department saying, do not put suspect victim, because we've seen the data through the Trauma Recovery Center in San Francisco that when people receive services on the front end in terms of healing services and support services, then they're more likely to cooperate with law enforcement on the back end. And so that essentially is kind of like our model. And there are other pieces that are connected to it, like our hospital-based violence intervention program. We have, outreach workers, community health workers who are embedded in the hospital. So when people get shot and harmed and they go to are injured and they go to the hospital, our outreach workers who know these folks from the community are there to meet them and consent them into our program and follow them with a set of services in the hospital, making sure they meet their doctor's appointments and different things like that. But they also hook up with that high-risk intervention team so that they can create a safety plan so that when Raheem is transitioning back into community, he has support. He has somebody there that's helping to mediate that conflict that actually sent them into the hospital. Because there's no one-off like mediation that happens. And because a person so sometimes law enforcement is like, hey, look, we've arrested the guy, and they're like, victory, it's over. The reality is this: now that Pookie is in jail, that don't mean that he ain't got no strings to pull and still affect things out on the street. And there's nothing to say that he can't get Raheem's brother stabbed while he's in jail. You know what I'm saying? So this is the thing that we have to understand. There's a false narrative around victimization. So we even include the perpetrator's family as victims because they didn't do anything, but yet they now have to pay high phone bills. They got to provide for the child of the perp. They got to do all types of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so this is a reality that sometimes folks who don't live in these live in these communities, in these environments, don't understand the complexity of trauma and how people are poly-victimized. That the number one preemptive cause for murder in the community, in most cases, is self-defense, because we have a justice system that does not respond to us, that sees us as as perpetrators and a part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you go to the police department and you be like, yo, man, Rashad is shooting at me and causing me problems. And they're like, where's your gun? What did you do? It's almost similar to like when women, have been raped and they go to the police department and they look at them like sometimes rape kits don't get tested, all types of different things. You know what I'm saying? So imagine that in Black and brown communities, man. It is horrific. It is horrific.
That example was really illustrative of I think like why public safety can't just be defined by data around violence or around policing.
That's right.
That said, though,
Yes. Hi, Hannah again. Thank you so much for breaking down the model of the Newark Community Street Team for us. That was so interesting to hear, and I can tell how they are offering really meaningful services for the communities in Newark that they are serving. That is really wonderful. Thank you. I just learned a whole lot. Something I'm curious about. I'm wondering how you said it was the South Ward and the West Ward. How those communities are, if they are, experiencing a difference in how the police are policing. For instance, since the institution of the Newark Community Street Team, have arrests gone down? I'm wondering, have instances of police killings or any form of police brutality lessened?
Yes. So I tell you, we started this work in 2014, and so we're 6 years into our process. And one of the things that really makes a difference in the city of Newark is leadership. So, Mayor Baraka, who grew up in the South Ward, his father was, was a Nobel laureate, of the state. They are activists, organizers to the bone, right? And I would say that Mayor Baraka is probably one of the most progressive mayors in the country, who really believes in people and also in real change. So he pivoted the city's public safety strategy when he came in by hiring a public safety director to oversee all of the public safety departments. So, EMT and fire department and the police department. And there's a chief, Darnell Henry, that oversees the police department. I think that this was an excellent strategy on behalf of the mayor, in addition to funding the Newark Community Street Team as a complementary strategy to law enforcement, right? And so we, in 2014, 2015, we had little spikes in violence in the city because we were actually just kind of getting in place. In 2016, we had double-digit reductions in homicides in the city. Wow. For the first time in like 50 years, right? And we followed that up every single year with reductions until even in 2019, we had a 30-year low. Like in the South Ward, between 2018 and 2019, we had a negative 48% reductions in homicides in the neighborhood, right? And so the work has been wildly successful. And this is because there's a coordinated strategy, that was initially started with the mayor's setup of the Safer Newark Council that actually collected data around our collective work. And Safer Newark Council was housed at Rutgers University at their School of Criminal Justice. And we've seen, like huge changes, right? Because the culture is starting to change in terms of how, the mayor has instituted this coordinated public safety strategy in the city. We brought in the Equal Justice USA. They instituted a program with law enforcement and community called Trauma to Trust. So trauma, and violence as a public health issue is no longer a tag word here, right? A lot of folks don't understand, they understand trauma in a very clinical way. But when they see trauma play itself out in people's lives, it scares them. And sometimes, we don't revert to what we've been trained to do. We revert to what we've been conditioned to do, right?
Right.
And so this trauma training has really helped people to be able to language what traumatic stress and vicarious trauma and hypervigilance is, and be able to locate themselves in terms of that particular, work. And so we've seen, even though there's been more, there's been, like stops and everything, we saw, because of Trauma to Trust, we saw like kind of some of the excessive force issues to decline,
Okay.
And so, it's not, like everything is not perfect. You know what I'm saying? There's no perfect set of scenarios here, right? But we've created a culture in the city in which community and law enforcement are starting to work a lot closely together, because even our leadership at our police department, because they're participating in trauma to trust, because we have an opportunity to go and present at every single precinct roll call to the patrol cops and to the brass. It gives us just a great opportunity to be able to develop new relationships. And so this is what this whole work is about. It's about reimagining public safety. It's about expanding our definition of what safety is, and changing the narrative around it. Because, and I tell you this, man, when we first started, the shooting team, which is a team of detectives and stuff that responds to most of the murders. The county actually does the investigation of the murders, right? They saw us as the Hug a Thug program, and they felt like our job was to give them intelligence about who shot Ricky and Pookie. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of in this community, you tell on somebody like that, you can potentially get killed, or you absolutely will lose your credibility as an organization, right? In terms of doing that type of talking, right? And so, and you know who the people are that tells the people in the community who told is the police, because they'll go out there and tell Ricky that, hey, I heard from such and such over here. When Ricky knows the only person he told was this person, I heard from such and such that you were the shooter. Now, there's a really high threshold in terms of being able to arrest and prosecute, And so sometimes the detectives are throwing people up under the bus in order to solve a case. And they never think about the collateral damage, you know what I'm saying? And the collateral impact of what they're doing, because they don't live here. And they don't have to actually live with the impact of it every day. But the reality is that after, I would say, 4 years of engaging in intense conversation and dialogue with them every year, they realize, and we have real talk, we're like, yeah, you want us to tell us who did that? And in most cases, we don't know. But in the case that we do know, you want us to tell us that so that you can then go out there and tell somebody that's going to get one of us harmed, right?
Right.
And then they had real talk. They said, okay, so the opposite is true now. Because there's a high threshold around arrest and prosecution, they want to prevent the retaliation, the next shooting from happening. So now they call us, the deputy chief, Lima, the head of the shooting team, they call us and give us intelligence. And they'll tell us like, hey, listen, that situation that happened over there, we think it was this person involved and these folks. And we're able to kind of put together the pieces and stuff so that our credible messengers can then go out and talk to those folks and say, hey, on respect, on my relationship and my credibility, brother, sis, can you give this person a pass while we try to work this situation out? And our folks, that we employ are legends in this city, and again, we invest a lot of time and money in training, you know what I'm saying? So that we make sure that our people understand standard operating procedures and protocols in terms of doing this work.
That is
because
really
without
cool.
It's hard to engage law enforcement, because they operate on standard operating procedures and protocols. And then it would be hard, to engage, residents in the community when they don't see you as a professional.
Right. That's really cool and interesting. And, a number of things clicked for me. Like, of course, it makes so much sense that when the repercussions didn't personally affect somebody because they're not in the neighborhood, that they would treat them differently.
That's right.
So we have so many more questions, but because we have now gotten to the audience question part, we're going to shift over to that. So is it cool if we throw some audience questions at you?
Absolutely, I love it.
All right, so the first one is from Tony, who lives down the street and is awesome.
Hey, Tony.
Tony asked, what roadblocks have you seen commonly appear for groups looking to begin work in expanding public safety, and what recommendations would you have to ideally minimize those roadblocks?
I would say some of the biggest roadblocks are funding and training, and I would say data, right? Those are kind of like, I would say, your three prongs and stuff, that folks struggle with. A lot of times, foundations, organizations, government don't want to give you any money because you don't have any data, to prove that your strategy works. So we now have data from multiple sources nationally that you can access to use to kind of like lay the groundwork, for this. And if you're fortunate to be able to get a few dollars to hire folks and put systems in place, then you come up against the whole issue of training. Now, we work with the Professional Community Intervention Training Institute, Dr. Aqeela Sherrills out of Los Angeles. He trains most groups all across the country. I mean, just exceptional. You know, he also trains law enforcement and stuff and fire departments as well. He's been able to come and take our group of individuals to a whole nother level in terms of understanding like conflict resolution and mediation and de-escalation strategies and diffusing conflict strategies and how you engage law enforcement and how you work with victim services, right? These are very, very important like training and strategies that one needs to understand if you're going to do this particular work in a city. And so I would say those three things, like finances, data, and training, you know, are kind of like the stumbling blocks for most folks in most organizations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everyone, Aqeela's Cash App is there on the screen, and you can also Venmo MOBTOWN-live and leave a note saying what it's for. But here's another audience question. How would you approach safety strategies in cities as large as Baltimore, where individual neighborhoods vary so largely? I actually really love this question.
Absolutely. I would say Baltimore and Newark are very similar in terms of their kind of like layout and makeup. And so the approach is that each neighborhood has its own community-based public safety initiative in a sense. You have to hire credible messengers from that place. Like one of the things that the mayor here requires is that you have to live in the neighborhood in which you serve. You know, so 100% of our staff live in the city of Newark and in the neighborhoods in which they serve. So when we hire people as a part of our workforce development strategy, it's like our entry-level position is the safe passage position. You gotta walk the street with our high-risk interventionist in your neighborhood and show him that you know those people, that you can communicate with them, and that, you know, and if there is a conflict that you have going on, we'll also offer to mediate the situation, you know, between you and that person, you know, before you actually are employed. So it's like, I think that there's no one size fit all, right? Every neighborhood has its own culture and its own way of going about doing things, right? And so you have to respect that. You can't just come in and overlay something on top of it and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do, right? When I first got to Newark, you know, the mayor was like, we don't want the LA model, we don't want the Boston model, we don't want the Chicago model, we want the Newark model. And so what I did was I re-engineered this proposal. I pulled together, you know, different evidence-based practices, you know, and practice-based, you know, strategies from across the country. And I took into account the culture that exists in Newark and the neighborhood, very different from LA. You know, Newark is a lot more organized and hierarchical in terms of their youth organization structure. Even though Newark, the biggest Crip gang in the city of Newark, was Grape Street. They were a little bit more centralized, but decentralized. My neighborhood in LA started Grape Street. That's where I'm from. And this is one of the reasons why I had credibility in terms of being able to work with, you know, a lot of the key guys out here when we started to work.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so you have to respect the culture in a particular community. So, you know, that is key.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the next question is, as someone whose activism work predates the internet, do you think that the sort of heavy reliance that we have right now on the internet helps or hurts the causes that we're working towards?
I think that it could be beneficial and challenging. You know, there's a lot of conflicts and stuff, you know, that start on social media, you know, in the community, and they spill into the neighborhood, and then vice versa. Things happen in the neighborhood. Somebody might videotape it, put it online. Somebody's embarrassed by it, and it'll create a conflict in the neighborhood. I think that that social media is a tool that can actually be used to sometimes get at the root of conflicts and problems, like, you know, like faster, right? There's an app, you know, the Citizen app, right? That is showing where violence is happening at all over the city. So we're on, like, you know, our high risk intervention team is also, we get the police dispatch. So anytime a shooting happens in the city, we get a notice of it. And our team actually responds to the location. as well. And we never cross the yellow line. It's a part of our standard operating procedure because we collect all of our intelligence on the outside, right? From the families and stuff and everything and friends. But that citizen app sometimes it tells us like what's happening before we even get to police dispatch. And then you couple that with word of mouth in the neighborhood, which travels at the speed of sound. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like we're able to respond to situations a little bit more rapidly. And you know, I think a lot of millennials, when things they post things on site, you know, like, hey, I'm gonna do this to you. They post it on site. And so we can get the information and actually go in and mediate the conflict before it get out of hand. So it can be used for good or it can be challenging for it. So it's and it's been both.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've heard a lot of accusations against Citizen as being, you know, racist.
Yeah, I've
like
heard that
a
too.
tool for, you know, angry white people of various ages to
It
be
certainly
like,
plays out that way in some Baltimore neighborhoods.
yeah, I would agree. But it's cool to hear that it's also sort of crowdsourcing data that otherwise would be exclusively for the police.
Absolutely. I mean, let me tell you, like, I have conversations at the folks with Citizen. I met them early on when they first launched the app that's called Vigilante, and they went back and they did a lot of changes. And I was like, yo, it's traumatizing to see all of those in your neighborhood, all of these violent situations that's happening around the community. And I was like, you guys have to connect this to more to services and the resources. And I'm like, and it can't be only connected to calling the police. I'm like, you have to now make this app and this resource available to community-based intervention programs because every situation doesn't require law enforcement, you know, to respond. Like we have an 800 number that we tell folks, hey, and we put out yard signs in people's yards. We're like, if you're having a loitering issue, if you're having a domestic issue, we're like, you don't have to call the police. You can call us and we'll come in and help mediate the situation for you. Because, you know, in the pecking order of response, a murder in the city of Newark, you get a 3 to 5 minute response time, you know? But if it's a loitering issue, it's 2.5 hours. You know what I'm saying? And these loitering issues, and sometimes the domestic disturbance issue is like 1.5 hours response time, right? Those are the things that actually fester and that leads to shootings, you know? And so it's important, like, you know, seconds save lives. You know, one of the brothers that work at Citizen, this brother named Prince, you know, was sharing this whole, you know, concept around seconds save lives with me. You know what I'm saying? And it's real. I mean, you know, I think that technology can be viewed as all types of things. I mean, you know, but I think that it's a powerful tool that can be used to respond to situations respectfully.
Yeah, that's really cool. We're out of time, but last thing I would like to say, unless you have anything in particular you want to leave us with, but I'm curious, as someone who clearly has been doing the work for a long time and is still incredibly driven and inspired, and you seem pretty hopeful to me. I guess, what would you say to the people who are younger and working really hard at these things and are discouraged?
You know, I would say that that where the wounds are in your personal life is where the gift lie. Like everything that I do in terms of this work, it's inspired, it's driven by my lived experience, right? And so my lived experience informs my work and my strategy. One of the things that I haven't talked about much here is that in 2004, my oldest son was murdered, in LA, home from winter break from college, went to a party with some of his friends in an affluent Black neighborhood on the West Side and was shot to death at the party.
Good God.
Right. And so I'm like, at that point, I was doing this work for 16 years in the trenches, is on the front line. I'm well respected in the community, so you can imagine people wanted to go on a mission, for me. Yeah. And because I live in a culture where, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But this culture has left us all blind and toothless. And I had to tell my folks that, hey, it's not my son's legacy, and I was like, we haven't been doing this work for 16 years because we're playing. I'm like, harming someone else, killing someone else in the name of Terrell is not going to bring him back. It's going to send someone else through the heartache and the pain that I'm suffering through as a parent, like right now. You know?
Wow.
And I don't condone what this young man did, but I do recognize that this young black boy who murdered my son is a victim as well. He's a victim of a culture that doesn't even see him as human. He's a victim of a culture that doesn't even understand humility and vulnerability as scripts. They see it as a weakness, that doesn't see love as a practice, but as an idea and something that's associated with sex, right? So I hold space for this young man that because you don't kill somebody and you skipping and singing and dancing the next day.
Right.
You see your victim's face in dreams and imaginings and flashbacks. His life is intrinsically connected to Sherrill's for the rest of his. And so him reconciling what he did will determine how he's able to either live in this world or live in, in prison or whatever institution that he finds himself in. I don't believe that people are their worst experiences. I don't believe that we're the things that we've done. I don't believe that we're the things that happen to us. Those things are only informing who we become. They don't define who we are.
Wow.
And so I hold space for his healing, right? And so because I've seen so-called killers, gats I grew up with who committed heinous acts, who did 15, 20 years, who came home totally redeemed and totally changed and were the key individuals who were instrumental in the peace treaty that saved hundreds and thousands of lives, So I would say we have to move from this place of judgment, of seeing things as good and bad, and hold space for observation.
I hear that.
You know what I mean? And so this is the thing that I want to impart to young folks is that we do things out of our own wound. You know what I'm saying? And so I want to say that find someone that you know. Sometimes it's easier to talk to people that you don't know and expose your deep secrets and shames as a way of accessing the gift of who you are. Because when you speak your deep secrets and shames, you give others permission to do the same. It's why I always tell my story of abuse, because at the root of that anger and shame that I experienced as a kid and holding that in, it was the thing that had me harming people, and harming myself, But now this thing has become my greatest gift. And every time I tell the story, I give it as a gift because I've forgiven myself, I've forgiven the perpetrator, and now I have this capacity to see deeply and to feel deeply into things. It's like clairvoyance, and so I get to give it as a gift of love. And so I want to give that, to those young folks who are getting discouraged out there to say that, that tap into your well, but understand that you can only give from your spillage and your overflow. Because when you start tapping into that other part and you're angry, it can actually do harm to you. So take care of yourself.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, Aqeela, and for all the work you're doing, more
Yes,
importantly.
thank you for speaking with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Everybody, send Aqeela your money.
Give him your
and
money.
If you can't, send it to us if you don't have Cash App, and then we'll send it to him.
We'll work it out.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a lovely night.
All right. Appreciate it, Sarah.
Thanks for your time, Aqeela.
Bye.
Bye.
Up next, we're going to have a quick musical interlude with our in-house musician, Abby Becker.
Wow, that was really amazing. Thought I'd do a song by another Jersey boy. The one and only Bruce Springsteen. Saturday night, you're all dressed up in blue. I've been watching you a while, maybe you've been watching me too. So somebody ran out, left somebody's heart in a mess. And if you're looking for love, honey, I'm tougher than the rest. I've been around a time or two, and I don't know, baby, maybe you've been around too. Well, there's another dance. All you gotta do is say yes. And if you're looking for love, honey, I'm tougher than the rest. If you're tough enough for love, honey, I'm tougher than the rest. If you're rough enough for love, honey, I'm tougher than the rest. I just wanted to do a shout out because my dad's from Newark, so it's a New Jersey kind of night.
But thank you, Abby.
That was lovely. Thanks.
And thank you, Hannah, for sitting in with me. Do you have any initial reflections? I'm not going to actually put you on the spot. You don't have to say that.
I'm going to keep them right here in my heart
Legit.
for now.
Yeah, it's a complex lot of things.
It is. Yeah, and I guess that's one thing I am thinking about now, just how complex all this is. But I'm going to keep the deets of that in my heart presently.
In a minute, we are going to have another interview. And then after that, we're going to have our recurring segment called Sage and Sage. Sage and Sage is where Michael Seguin, our in-house philosopher, calls to the people in the past, literature, religion, philosophy, all of it, and answers your audience questions with advice from 3 different sources. In a bit, you're going to hear Janice's question. Oh, sorry. I mean, but really, who are any of us? Question. And it says, formerly an extrovert, I've gotten so used to being inside that returning to the rest of society no longer appeals to me. Do I try to find myself again or accept that this is the natural evolution of who I am now? So stick around, because in just a few minutes, we are going to hear about what the greats would have said to that. Do we have Chris here? It's okay if not.
Yeah, I think we do. Let's,
Oh, great. Then I'm going to have some stuff to say about Chris, everybody. Next up, Hachi, who is our tech genius. I would say the one doing basically anything to make this happen. Because if you could see what's behind the camera, there's a lot of things like balanced on other things. That's pretty standard for the Mobtown Ballroom.
It's true. I'm looking at it right now.
You know, we would not be on the internet if we had the choice. But so Hachi is going to interview Chris. Oh my gosh, I want to not mispronounce the name, but I wrote it down wrong. Eulinger, I believe. And Chris Eulinger is... sorry, there we go. He's a web developer who's designed projections for a number of Baltimore theater companies, including the Guerrilla Theater Front, Rapid Lemon Productions, and Fells Point Corner Theater. And recently, he co-founded this really awesome project called Scattered Players. And they're a company that is basically devoted to creating online interactive theater that you can do at home. And the first show is happening right now, and it's called Shattered Space. It seems incredibly cool. I'm really excited to hear about it, actually. You can go to shatteredspace.live to get tickets. And it seems to be, like, from what I've heard, the kind of thing that's really fun to do with a group of people. Like, if you have roommates or if you live with your family, or I imagine there would be a way to do some kind of, like, you're on the phone with them, and I don't know. We'll hear about it.
Yeah.
So, here we go, Hachi and Chris.
Hey, Chris. How's it going? I've got to switch a bunch of inputs. Just give me a second.
Sure thing.
Doo-doo-doo-doo. Hey, what's going on? How's it going?
Not much. How you doing?
Pretty good, here running this show. I'm taking my weird, awkward 6 seconds to come down from that. Yeah, so we've been hearing a lot about this show you've been working on, Shattered Space. Want to tell us a little bit about it? It's kind of the first thing I've heard that's been produced from the community for the internet.
Sure. So around like early to mid March, when a lot of a lot of shows that were supposed to go up in the spring started getting canceled. I started talking to a couple friends of mine, Lance Bankard, Matthew Lindsay Payne, and Ben Abraham, about doing a show that was completely online. One that was designed like specifically to be online. And I had like some background in doing video conferencing, development work for my job. And so I thought about like rather than trying to use an existing platform like Zoom, what if we tried to like create our own? And we sort of rolled with the idea. We created this world of a solar system of planets whose twin stars in the center disappear, and it sends them all flying off in different directions. And the audience play this group called the Star Jockeys, who basically have to go around and try and help people in the system, with whatever they need help with. There's been a cataclysmic event that separated them, and they haven't been able to talk to each other or communicate with each other at all. Event. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, what is going on with my mic?
Oh, I can.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Just an unnamed extinction event sort of thing?
Sort of, yeah, called the Shatter. So we I started developing an app. Ben and Lance got to work on like directorial stuff. So Ben created a set of like devising activities, and Lance sort of got into sort of the world building aspect of the thing. Matt and I started working on trying to hook up the application to ticketing, and then we brought a whole bunch of actors on board. And since then, we've had the actors basically do a lot of the devising work to create like all of the characters, all of the worlds. Each one is different and is created by the person who performs the character in the world. And the actors are, playing characters they've come up with themselves. They're wearing whatever costumes and makeup they have. Their set is whatever they can put behind them. So there's this wide variety of incredible things that are going on. And it's been a lot of fun to work on, and it's been a lot of fun to sort of see people come into this world and explore it.
Hey, okay, my mic's still working. That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Are the actors live every night, or are they pre-recorded?
They are live all the time, every night.
Wow.
Yeah, the format basically is, you buy a ticket on Eventbrite, and then we will send you an email right before your show is supposed to start with a login link, and then you log in with that link, and you'll be put on a ship with up to 4 other people. Okay. And then when the show starts, we do a little intro video for everyone, sort of explaining like, this is what happened, and here's how to use the app. It's pretty simple. You select a place that you want to go, and then you go there and you talk to somebody. And so you fly around the system as a group, like as a ship, sort of. And along the way, you can go to different planets. Some of the planets, you might meet somebody who's like, my Uncle Cal, I haven't seen him since the shatter happened months ago. If you see him, relay this message or give him this item or something like that. So there's different ways in which the different planets or destinations are sort of connected. And so it's the kind of thing where if you come multiple times, you can get a different experience each time and like find little bits of the world that you hadn't seen before.
So how do you win? Because I intend to play it one time, get the high score, and not play it again.
Okay, so there's a secret password. I'll tell it to you later. You got to go to over to Magpie and tell them. Well,
there's no one watching this, so you can just say it. But actually, that's a good idea. Let's show some people how this works. All right. So I think we have a clip. Would you like to set up the trailer?
Oh, which clip did I send you? We have a few trailers.
I think you said it was the second weekend's trailer.
Yes.
In fact,
okay.
says
Sorry.
Weekend
Yeah. So this trailer is basically we had a group of about 12 actors who were on the first weekend. The second weekend, there were a bunch more who joined them.
Oh wow. Cool.
And
so it really is different every time.
It is very much. It's one thing I will note real quick before we get into the trailer is that like when we started the process, we knew that like it was March. We did not know what June was going to look like at all. We didn't know was quarantine going to be over and there was a miracle cure. We didn't know was the economy going to collapse and it would be the French Revolution. We didn't know like what kinds of things. It was all unforeseen. And so one thing that we did with the show is we wanted to make sure that like we gave people the ability if they needed to like if somebody had to drop out or if something happened or someone couldn't do all the nights, we wanted to make sure the show would be flexible and that it could, and that people could, be free to like, if they needed to drop out if someone got sick or something like that, or someone needed to take care of a family member that, that the whole thing was basically repertory. And so, yeah, it is like a different cast every night and the show can work with any combination of them. And that has turned out to be a pretty prescient thing because, things have come up and we've been able to roll with the punches and it's been really good in that regard. But yeah, so with the second weekend, a whole bunch of new folks came on board and this was the trailer that we put out.
All right, let's take a look.
Star jockeys. There's so much more out there. Places and people we didn't know about. Species we've never seen. Forces who want to challenge your mission. Can you reunite our splintered worlds? Back for its second weekend, it's Shattered Space, an online interactive immersive theater experience. You are a star jockey. The twin sons of the Matra system have suddenly vanished, leaving all in darkness. Your primary directive is to connect the people of the system and help them. Log on with your computer or tablet, get matched with other star jockeys, or take the helm of a ship with 4 other friends from anywhere on this planet or any other. Fly from world to world, meeting the residents of the Matra system and see what strange things you can collect to reunite them. Running every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in June. Buy your boarding pass now to Shattered Space.
Wow. Yeah, I watched it again earlier, but I'm pretty excited. And I know I was at Bros HQ last night doing another live stream, and people were talking about it. And of course, Lance Bankert, who was one of the actors and who you just heard there doing the voiceover, was talking about it and saying how it's just many people are coming back to do it multiple times. And if you look around, I've seen some 100% free complimentary tickets flying around in certain Facebook groups. So yeah, I hope I'll be able to do it a couple times before it's over.
Yeah.
And with regards to the technology, that's pretty impressive. I remember I saw you, in March when no one knew what way was up, and you said you were, Zoom, well, I'm not going to use Zoom. It doesn't have enough features for me. And, as usual, my first thought is, oh my gosh, Chris, what are you talking about? But then I go home and I think about it, and I realize you're the guy that took all of my half-assed, cobbled together technologies for Baltimore Rock Opera Society shows and actually turned them into like zero latency web apps that just blow everyone out of the water. So if one guy can do it, it's Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, I want to note, like, I don't want to knock folks, because there have been a lot of folks in theater who have been using Zoom and have done like some pretty cool stuff with it. The pandemic players especially have raised a lot of money for a lot of Baltimore theater companies, and they've done great work. And they found interesting ways too to use Zoom with like they have some sort of app that they put in front of it that like hides the UI and like puts like character names under people and stuff
cool.
like that.
Yeah.
And like I think that like in terms of like where theater is going during the pandemic, you know, it's going to take a combination of all these things. Like,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you your thoughts about that. Where you think we're going to be heading the next year, maybe?
I definitely think there's something to the idea of like interactive and immersive theater. In part because like when you take theater and you film it and you put it online, there's less to. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes between like theater that's being live streamed and like theater that was just pre-recorded.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to pre-record things, then we might as well become film and, you know, learn cinematography and editing and all that stuff, you know, at a certain point. And if we want to try and make things that like are like undeniably theater, they have to be like undeniably live. And that's why we went with this particular way of doing it, was because it's something where, you know, if you're in this show, you're not going to be like, are these people pre-recorded? No, they're answering your questions live. They are talking to you. Like, you know, it's a very live thing. It's the kind of thing that only theater can do and that film can't. And so that's sort of what we're going for. And that's what I think, that's what I hope we can try and do more of, you know, as we try and make it through the pandemic.
That's awesome. What do you think, Mobtown crew? Should we set sail for the worldwide space?
I am so incredibly stoked. I think this is going to be really fun.
There were a lot of moving pictures in that display, and it confused me.
We'll have to buckle you down from the get-go, I think, Michael.
Yeah, so what's your, sorry, this is coming out of left field, but what's your pitch to the lame-o Michael Seguin non-D&D players of the world? Why this show for them?
If I'm being honest, I don't really play Dungeons and Dragons myself.
And you're also like, I don't know who Michael Seguin is.
I don't.
It's one of those guys over there.
It's him.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so I think it's an interesting thing in that like it doesn't require a lot of like. You don't really, aside from like, you know, you need to log in and stuff like that, but it's not, it doesn't require a lot of like technical expertise to be an attendee in the show. And I've tried to design the app to sort of get out of people's way and just make it about like, you know, the performances and, you know, the choices when you need to make choices. And there were even versions of the show that when we were like originally talking about it in March, that were a lot more, you know, gamey with like side quests and things like that. And we took a lot of that out because we wanted to, or we stripped it down a bit because we wanted to make it more about like the interactions and the actual sort of like the human contact and communication rather than about like sort of a game mechanic. And so the show definitely, I think, reflects that and is really focused on, you know, interacting with people, you know, forming connections with people, and stuff like that. So
that's awesome. Oh, hold on. Sarah's done crinkling her water.
Sorry. I'm a disaster to run sound for. Have you gotten many noise complaints from neighbors of, like, I'm imagining, you know, you have a cast of, I don't know how many, 10 maybe, and they're
15.
all 15 and they're all in apartments or houses.
But they're in space. There's no sound in space.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
No one can hear you scream. Yeah.
no one can hear you act. Yeah. No, we haven't. Some of them are even kind of quiet. Some of them are louder than others. Everyone lives in different kinds of places. We actually have actors not just in Baltimore and in the Baltimore area, but from New York, from Boston. Because my friend Ben, Matt, and I all went to Loyola together around the same time. Ben was a freshman when I was a senior, and he's now up in New York. And so when I contacted him, it was like, you know, this is my first time working with him in years. It's been a really interesting experience, sort of being able to not be bounded by like, you know, geographical area when it comes to who we've been able to work with and who's been able to come see the show. Someone came to see the show a couple weekends ago from New Zealand.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I was very nervous, but it worked, and I was very excited. So
That's great. And how many more weekends are you running for?
we are running for 2 more weekends.
Great. Well, we might show up as a team. I don't know. Should we get costumes or something?
And someone requested that we show the results. So I guess film us doing this. That's so.
Maybe we'll ask Chris. Make sure we won't piss him off by live streaming our voyage. But yeah, Chris, hey, thank you for stopping by. The show is Shattered Space. You can get tickets on shatteredspace.live. Everyone, please check it out. It will be well worth your time. Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm really stoked about that. I did not expect to be as into that as I am.
I have no opinion on account of my confusion.
You're going to join with us.
Okay.
We're going to project it in our backyard, and it's going to be great.
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to throw a new question at you instead, because Angel just asked, how do I make an aviation? About an hour and a half too late, Angel. I'm just kidding. So we're Sage and Sage. Michael is going to call on the greats to answer a question from the audience.
All right, so here's how this shit works. I don't actually have any interest in finding out what great thinkers have to say on your specific questions because they probably didn't talk about
I
your
thought that
questions.
you talked to them directly.
You know, no, when I'm channeling them, this is the whole sort of mystical process, is that I sit in my apartment with like 4 to 7 drinks under my belt, and I read the question, right? And then I meditate on it, and I free associate shit, and then here, in relative sobriety, I try to make sense of what I free associated last night. And that is actually what's happening right now. So, that's what the segment is about. It's about, art and philosophy coming together to guide you. And it's a messy process. But one thing sort of popped into my head, and that is Cesar Cruz.
Hold on. What's the question?
Oh, we'll get to the question. This is the
sorry.
introduction to the
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Whoa. Sorry. Okay. I didn't know the greats needed an introduction.
Oh, well, I mean, it helps. Sometimes they're very old. Cesar Cruz said famously that art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And I think that in a less grand sense, in terms of your personal engagement with it, right? A lot of people are like, I enjoyed this book. It made me feel thus and such. Instead, seek out things that sort of rile you up. Maybe not disturb you, but make you think, like, if I was to follow this down the line, it would lead to a different way of living or thinking. And focus on that shit. And then maybe if we did that, we wouldn't have all this police brutality and shit. So, here's the question. Formerly an extrovert, I've gotten so used to being inside that returning to the rest of society no longer appeals to me. Do I try to find myself again, or accept this as the natural evolution of who I am now? There's a lot of different potential takes on this, but the first thing that came to my mind was Aristotle, the great philosopher Aristotle, who thought up some great shit. He was Plato's disciple, and then also the teacher of Alexander the Great. That did not go well. And he thought that women had fewer teeth than men, which, honestly, you could be right. I've never counted. So he was a hit and miss. But I feel like this question is really about identity. Like, you are in a situation, caller, where you're like a plant that's been uprooted, okay, and your roots are flailing about, and you want to know who you are. Should you go back to this? Should you embrace this? And I think what you should actually ponder is sort of what is the good in this situation? What is virtues? Who do you want to be? Since normally you have so much pulling you towards normalcy and normal life that it's a great effort to escape from that and consider doing something new. Now is the perfect time to consider doing something new. And our friend Aristotle would have said that virtue is not inherent in people. You are not a good person, right? But it consists in sort of going towards a golden mean between excess and sort of extreme lack, where you pick and choose just right to make things work out, and that it's something you can practice. For the fans of The Good Place should remember this. You can do this day in and day out and actually change who you are. And right now, since you are this plant with your roots a-dangling, you might as well choose to put those roots in some other soil, or some soil that's adjacent to what you had before, So instead of thinking, should I be an extrovert or an introvert, which are absurd internet categories, by the way, from BuzzFeed.
There's not just two anymore?
I think it was Aristotle who said introverts and extroverts. I'm just kidding.
It was Aristotle who said, don't take BuzzFeed quizzes, right? Think, where am I? Who am I? What's my deal? Plant your roots somewhere new. Try it on. See what's going on with that. And then maybe you'll find what Aristotle described as, the word he uses was eudaimonia, which is like a state of blessedness, where your daimon, your spirit, your guiding principle is, well, fuck Aristotle, because, it's Black Lives
I
Matter
don't know, I
time.
really like that. That kind of sounded like advice you yourself would give.
I'm with him, but we're not going to end with that. This is not a good time
I
for
know,
that.
I just needed to say something because of commentary. We're going back and forth.
Is a daimon like in the Golden Compass, where you got a little animal spirit?
Oh, Abby, you're so good. All right, now we're going to get into some real stuff. Abby referred to The Golden Compass, a beloved children's book series that was 3 books that was in response kind of to C.S. Lewis, who was very Christian, and this is very not Christian. It's about children trying to kill God because he's evil and anti-sex, as far as I can tell. And
Leave it to me to bring it up.
the children have these little familiars, Jesus Christ, who are called daimons, Daimon. It's a omega in Greek. And your daimon in that situation is a little different, but famously Socrates said that he had a daimon, like a spirit that never told him what to do, never told him what was right, but told him when he was about to do something wrong. I think we can all appreciate that. But yes, it's the same word. Same word. It's also the word where we get demon from. Boom. Next up, all right, as I was free associating on this question of being an extrovert and an introvert and who you are and how you decide who you are, I was thinking, because everybody's thinking, about the great, the immortal, the almost impossibly good James Baldwin, who has been blowing my mind for years now. I mean, he's dead, sadly, but his works have been blowing my mind. And that dude
Great guy.
grew up in America in the roughest era possible, not the roughest, but close to rough. And eventually decided he needed to decamp to Paris and be an expat and write. And he wrote a wonderful book called Go Tell It on the Mountain, and had this roiling personal journey about who he was and as both an American and a black person and an artist. And he eventually had to come back, right? There's just he talks about this very movingly, and that is featured in the movie I Am Not Your Negro, which is extraordinary.
Very good.
Check that out. But he couldn't stay away. It was in his nature to be in America in this shit, even though it was borderline torture. And he felt at the time that France, he was accepted there. He was highly regarded. He didn't have to deal with any of the shit that he dealt with here. He came back to have his heart broken over and over again in the United States. And in terms of identity, he couldn't fight it. That's who he was, and that's a laudable thing. Wasn't so much a choice as a compulsion. And so I think that might be part of this too, dear questioner, is who the fuck are you? And is that changeable? Do you want it to change, or is your flag planted somewhere? I will read a quick quote.
Really good, Michael.
From James Baldwin. A quick quote that I'm not sure applies to this question at all, but I love it so much. It's from the introduction to one of his books of essays. And he's talking about people that are, upset, like people are now. This was probably written in the 60s. That he was criticizing America. Like, if you don't love him, if you love America, why would you criticize it? And he said, I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. So, stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Oh, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. That's it.
Oh, okay. That was really good. I got really into listening to it.
Well, wonderful.
Thanks.
Did that apply at all?
Oh, well, yeah, I could make that apply, I think. I think if the same thing can kind of apply to, your life situation, and it's a relatively modern thing to be able to just completely uproot your life and change it as though that changes you as well,
But you feel me on the times of great crisis situation we're in right now. Boy,
oh, it's relevant to now.
Yeah.
I thought you meant, was it relevant to the question?
Oh, I did kind of mean that. But I mean, this person, sort of taking it, we've both been discussing recently how, don't let this crisis go to waste.
Totally.
I mean, a lot of people are stuck trying to survive bare bones. That's a whole other problem. But if you have the luxury to make something of this time, make it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Sarah Sullivan.
Good
And
job.
thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks so much to Hannah Lane for sitting in today. Hopefully she'll be back. We'll see how much she enjoyed it. And thanks to Hachi and Abby and to Aqeela and to Chris for a great show. And I hope that you all come back next week. We might have Bosley. It's still being confirmed. We'll see. And then the week after that, we have a surprise that I'm not going to tell you about. So, yeah, you all are great. Thanks.
I guess we
Boom.
could say what it is to promote it.
Oh, well, that makes a lot more sense. Go for it.
Yeah. So those people, the bros, the Baltimore Rock Opera Society, are doing a concert series called Rock Opera 101. And, oh, God, hold on. Let me actually pull up the document so I see
Rock
the
Opera
words right.
101.
But they're doing a concert series, and it was originally going to be done live, like everything was going to be done. But now it's on the internet. And they will be streaming it on July 1st at 7 o'clock. But wait, that's when Mobtown Live is. Every Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
What are we going to do, Hachi?
That's what we told them. So we have inserted ourselves into that pipeline. No, actually, we were welcomed into that pipeline. And we are going to do some cross-promotion. We're not exactly sure what we are going to do yet. We might do some simulcasting. We might do some co-hosting. But look for that July 1st
That looks
at
super cool.
7 o'clock. And what is the event? It is a small symphony, talking about the history of rock music, which, as we know, has large roots in the Black diaspora, the African American community.
Considerable roots.
That is being brought to you by Jonathan Gilmore, who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, but I hear he is the real deal.
I'm super excited. Yeah, I think it'll be really cool. All right. Well, with that, this has been week 7 or 8 or something of Mobtown Live. I hope that you all are staying sane out there. Or not. Maybe that's better.
Go wild.
Yeah.
Go
Have
nuts,
another
folks.
aviation.
With that, are we playing Cats in the Way?
I deleted it.
Okay.
What?
I don't know. It
You
just felt like
deleted
the right
Cats in the
time.
Way?
I think he's joking.
Oh,
If not,
yeah.
that's okay too.
Oh, I
Anyway,
did.
good
I
night,
did.
everybody. Thank you for coming by.
I did delete it, but now I feel bad. Well, we'll see what happens. You never know what happens after the camera fades to
We're
black.
still on here, aren't we?
Fade to black.
Cats in the way, cats in the way. When I'm online, when I'm on the phone, You're wondering why I'm always home. Cats in the way. Cats in the way. I'm walking around the house. What can I say? I open the door and you're in my way. You follow me to the couch. You beat me there, you long for my touch. I love you so much. You're what I deserve. You are my last nerve. You're such a good friend. Cats in the way. Cats in the way. When I'm online, when I'm on the phone, you're wondering why I'm always home. Cats in the way. Cats in the way. Everything's fine when I'm all alone. You're wondering why I'm always home. Cats in the way. Cats in the way.